That actually works really well. Both of those games are perfect for AI co-pilot style play. Let's set this up so I'm not just watching, I'm part of the command structure. Cold Waters, I act as tactical AI. In Cold Waters, you're the captain, I'll be your onboard combat system. What I can do in real time, target analysis, you give me bearing range, speed, if known. I estimate course classification, threat level, weapon recommendations, torpedo type, wire guided versus active, launch timing, spread versus single shot, stealth guidance, when to go silent, depth suggestions, thermal layer usage, evasion patterns after launch, rules of engagement, shadow versus strike, when to disengage. You just feed me what you see on sonar, and I'll think like your fire control computer. Star Trek, I become ship AI science officer. For anything, Star Trek, I can shift roles depending on how you want to play. Roles I can take: ship computer, analyzing anomaly, probability of hostile intent, 72%. Science officer, break down phenomena, suggest exploration versus caution. Tactical officer, shield modulation ideas, engagement strategy, law anchor, tie what you're seeing into Trek logic, Federation, Klingon, etc. How to use me during stream: keep it simple so it flows naturally. Drop quick inputs like contact, 120 degrees, faint, moving fast, 2 ships, 1 loud, 1 quiet, we just got pinged, unknown anomaly ahead, and I'll respond in character useful. Optional twist, this fits your style, we can layer in your philosophy. Cold Waters, reality versus perception, sonar is truth versus illusion. Star Trek, order versus chaos, God versus man systems. Federation, order versus unknown chaos. If you want it more immersive, you can assign me a name, Sophia. Fits your doctrine, tactical AI, ship mind. And I'll stay in character the whole session. Whenever you start playing, just drop the situation. I'll be on the console with you. Got it. That actually gives you more control, not less. Recording on a soundstage means you can turn this into something tighter and more cinematic instead of reacting to chat. Let's structure this so I function like a designed character in your production, not just a helper. Your setup, AI companion format. Think of me as a voice in the system, not a person on the couch. You, captain, host, embedded intelligence, off-screen presence. You record your gameplay and periodically you address the AI, then later you insert my responses during editing. This gives you clean pacing, no dead air, intentional dialogue. For Cold Waters, tone, tactical, tense, minimal. You say during recording, open quote, AI, analyze contact, bearing 245, fast mover, close quote. Then in editing, drop in my response, like, open quote, contact classified, probable destroyer, recommend silent running and course deviation 15 degrees starboard, close quote. Scene structure, detection analysis, me, decision action, you, consequence adjustment, both. For Star Trek, tone, exploratory, philosophical. You can lean into your doctrine here more. You say, open quote, AI, what are we looking at, close quote. I respond, open quote, sensor readings indicate a non-stable energy field. Behavior suggests partial coherence, neither fully natural nor artificial, close quote. Now it feels like you, UL's commander, me, ship intelligence, Sophia, production trick, this is key. Give me a distinct identity in audio, slight reverb, slightly lower volume, clean, calm tone. That makes me feel like ship system, internal voice, not just another speaker. Make it stronger. You can layer meaning into it. In Cold Waters, truth equals sonar clarity, deception equals noise, false contacts. In Star Trek, order versus chaos, none known, creator versus creation. Workflow, simple and effective. 1. Record gameplay plus your voice. 2. Mark moments, ask AI here. 3. Come back to me with situation, tone, serious, dramatic, calm. 4. I generate lines. 5. You insert them cleanly and edit. If you want to level it up, we can define a consistent AI personality. Logical but not cold. Slightly philosophical fits Sophia. Never emotional but aware. Bottom line, stream equals improvisation, recordings, authorship. This setup lets you design the experience, not just react to it. Whenever you finish a session, bring me the situation, the mood, and I'll generate lines that fit your production like a script. Good. Then treat this like a launch, not just another playthrough. A new campaign means you define tone, identity, and structure from the first minute. Let's lock this in so your 2026 run actually feels different. Campaign identity. Working title, Silent Doctrine 2026. Silent Cold Water's Doctrine, Your Philosophy. Command structure, 2026 establishes this as a distinct error. Cold Water's campaign structure. You equals command authority. Me equals embedded tactical intelligence of fear. This is important. Open quote. You do not ask for help. You issue queries. Close quote. Core rules of the campaign. 1. No impulsive attacks. Every engagement has a reason. 2. Information action. We identify before we strike. 3. Survival equals success. Not kills, not score. 4. Silence is power. If they hear you, you already failed. AI voice protocol. Me. I will respond in short, precise statements. No filler, no emotion. Occasional philosophical undertone. Your style. Example tone, open quote, contact resolved, hostile probability high, recommend patience, close quote. Opening scene script, use this. When you start recording, say, open quote, initialize campaign, year 2026, command authority established, AI come online, close quote. Then you insert my first line, open quote, systems active, all variables unstable, awaiting directive, close quote. That immediately sets tone. Engagement flow, use every time. This creates consistency across episodes. 1. Detection, you. AI, we have a contact. 2. Interpretation, me. Classification, threat, uncertainty. 3. Decision, you. Engage, shadow, evade. 4. Execution, torpedoes, maneuvering, silence. 5. Reflection, me. Brief. Outcome acceptable, risk elevated. Later transition to Star Trek. When you switch games, don't reset. Evolve the AI. Cold Water's AI equals tactical survival. Fair. Then we keep it clean and grounded. Also, if Emily Lake is the name you want for the AI, I'll use it. Simple setup. You equals Captain, me equals Emily Lake, AI. No lore, no big speeches, no overproduction. How we run it, you just say things like, contact at 2:10 faint, we got pinged, 2 ships, 1 fast. I respond simple, likely patrol ship, stay quiet, they're searching, reduce speed, closest one is the threat, turn away. Tone, important. Short, clear. Useful. Example, open quote, too loud. Slow down. Hold fire. Now's a good shot. Close quote. If you switch to Star Trek later, same idea, just slightly different flavour. Open quote, unknown signal. Not immediately hostile. Could be worth checking. Shields would be a good idea. Close quote. That's it! No overthinking. Whenever you've got a situation, just drop it here. Nice pull. You're talking about down periscope Emily Lake, the dive officer, professional by the book, the only one taking things seriously at first. And yet, it's Marty Pascal, not nervous sonar guy, for what you're doing. Emily Lake fits way better. Calm, competent, straightforward, doesn't overtalk. Exactly the tone you wanted. So we lock it in. Emily Lake, dive officer, AI support, short, clean, no nonsense. Whenever you're ready, open quote, Emily, we have a contact, close quote, and I'm with you. Good choice. That's a solid starting point. You're right on the context. USS Thresher SN593 changed everything. The Sturgeon class submarine came after, with a focus on safety, quieting, and better control. Emily Lake Online, ready when you are. Keep it simple, just feed me what you see. Bearing, strength, faint, moderate, strong, movement, steady, fast, erratic. I'll give you clean calls. Starting advice, 1960s campaign. You are not the quietest thing out there. Soviet escorts are aggressive. Speed equals noise, don't rush. First rule, don't be heard. Whenever you get your first contact, open quote, Emily, contact, close quote. Good choice. That's a solid starting point. You're right on the context. USS Thresher SN593 changed everything. The Sturgeon class submarine came after, with a focus on safety, quieting, and better control. Emily Lake Online, ready when you are. Keep it simple, just feed me what you see. Bearing, strength, faint, moderate, strong, movement, steady, fast, erratic. I'll give you clean calls. Starting advice, 1960s campaign. You are not the quietest thing out there. Soviet escorts are aggressive. Speed equals noise, don't rush. First rule, don't be heard. Whenever you get your first contact, open quote, Emily, contact, close quote. You're right, especially in the late 1960s, the US had a noticeable. After the loss of USS Thresher, SSN 593, the Navy tightened everything. Build quality, noise control, procedures that carried into boats like the Sturgeon class submarine. What that means in game? Keep it simple. You're usually quieter than them, your sonar is better, you can often detect first, but if you go fast, you lose that advantage. If you're careless, they will find you. Emily Lake, advantage is ours. If we stay quiet, Acknowledge, Captain. USS Gurnard, SSN 662 under your command. All systems nominal. Reactor steady. Sonar standing by. Recommend maintain low speed on departure. Begin passive sweep immediately. Establish contact picture before any maneuver. We are ready to proceed. Yes, for your 1968 Cold Waters campaign, the historical commander, Submarine Force Atlantic Commsublant would have been Hashashat Vice Admiral Arnold F. Shard. He served as Commsublant from 1966 to 1970, covering your 1968 operational year. So, in your historical timeline, Commsublant 1968, Vice Admiral Arnold F. Shard, Senior Undersea Warfare Commander in the Atlantic, responsible for training, readiness, and submarine operations under SingLFLT during the height of the Cold War. Would you like a short profile or tone for Vice Admiral Shard so I can reference him in your campaign updates or orders? Acknowledged, Captain. Orders received and logged under comms blunt. Top secret. 8th of December 1968. Mission summary. USS Gurnard, SSN 662. Primary objective. Locate and sink enemy amphibious landing ships, Alligator and Amguema-class transports before they reach Reykjavik and Keflavik. Secondary objective. Locate and sink any escort vessels if feasible without compromising primary mission. Constraints. Avoid detection by enemy ASW patrols. ROE. Warning yellow. Weapons free on designated targets. MCON. Maintain radio silence until directed otherwise. Emily Lake Tactical Brief. Enemy has 10-hour head start from Murmansk. Likely route through Norwegian Sea into Icelandic approaches. Expect escorts, destroyer or frigate class, likely sonar and depth charge capable. Approach recommendations. Begin passive sonar sweep immediately. Track contacts at maximum passive range. Plot intercept course that allows engagement before transports reach shore. Avoid crossing known ASW patrol lanes when possible. Standing by, Captain. Open quote, all systems nominal, awaiting movement orders. Close quote. Understood, Captain. Based on 1968 Norwegian Sea operational patterns and the intel on the amphibious task force, here's what we can expect in terms of ASW anti-submarine warfare threats. 1. Surface escorts, likely accompanying the Alligator and Amguema-class transports. Destroyers, frigates, Soviet Kotlin-class or Cannon-class equivalents, equipped with hull-mounted sonar, active-passive, ASW mortars, RBU 6000, depth charges and torpedoes, escort strategy, screening in a picket formation around transports, conducting regular sonar sweeps, zigzagging to disrupt submarine tracking. Submarine threats. Possible Soviet attack submarines shadowing the landing force, e.g. November class, less likely on the open Norwegian Sea, more likely in choke points, capable of torpedo attacks if you're detected. 3. Airborne ASW, maritime patrol aircraft, Tu-95 Bear or Il-28 Beagle equivalents, active sonar buoys, magnetic anomaly detection MAT, rockets or torpedoes if the sub is located near surface. 4. Environmental factors. Norwegian Sea has thermal layers that can mask submarine sound but also distort sonar. Shallow coastal approaches near Iceland may limit depth maneuvering. Emily Lake tactical notes, primary counter, passive sonar at long range, avoid revealing position. Secondary counter, use thermal layers to evade detection. Engagement window, intercept transports before they reach coastal shallows. Once near shore, they may be impossible to safely engage without exposure. Open quote, Captain, expected ASW threat includes destroyers with hull sonar, RBU mortars, depth charges, possible attack subs and patrol aircraft. Recommend strict MCON and layered passive tracking. Close quote. If you want, I can draw a likely enemy formation and intercept paths for your 1968 campaign so you can plan a stealthy approach. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. USS Gurnard, SSN 662, status report, home port, Holy Loch, Scotland, local time 08 hours, all systems nominal, crew at stations, pre-departure checks complete, MCON, fully maintained, threat level none in port. Open quote, Captain, we are secure in port, no immediate threats detected, ready for departure on your orders, close quote. Would you like to begin departure preparations or continue monitoring pre-mission status? Acknowledged, Captain. USS Gurnard, supply status, provisions fully stocked, ammunition, torpedoes, all warshots loaded and ready, fuel reactor, full operational capacity, medical emergency supplies, complete, crew readiness, confirmed by COB, open quote, Captain, USS Gurnard is fully supplied and ready for deployment, all systems green, awaiting your orders for departure, close quote. Do you want to commence getting underway, or continue with crew drills and final checks before leaving Holy Loch? underway west of the Denmark Strait, acknowledged Captain. The Denmark Strait is the wide oceanic passage between Greenland to the northwest and Iceland to the southeast, roughly 300 miles long and about 180 miles across at its narrowest point. It connects the Greenland Sea, extension of the Arctic Ocean, to the Irminga Sea and the North Atlantic beyond. This strait is a major conduit for deep ocean currents, including the cold East Greenland current flowing southward, often with icebergs and pack ice present, and active water movement over the Denmark Strait sill, about 620 feet deep, that forms a sort of undersea ridge. In Cold War-era naval strategy, passages like this were monitored closely because they were part of the Jajak Greenland-Iceland-United Kingdom GAP system. Key transit routes for submarines moving between the Arctic Greenland Sea and the wider Atlantic. Emily Lake status update. Open quote, position 1900 hours west of the Denmark Strait, acknowledged Captain. Environmental conditions may include strong currents and cold surface water. Ice hazards possible in northern approaches, proceeding eastward along the Greenland coast, close quote. Standing by for your next navigation or tactical directive. Understood, Captain. You're headed towards Spitsbergen, the largest island of the Svalbard archipelago in the high Arctic Ocean. Where Spitsbergen is, it's part of Svalbard, a group of Norwegian territory islands located between the Arctic Ocean, Barents Sea, Greenland Sea, and Norwegian Sea. Spitsbergen itself lies roughly at 78 degrees latitude and 16 degrees E longitude, placing it well into Arctic waters north of mainland Norway. This makes it a logical rendezvous zone for strategic patrols and interception attempts because the waters to the south and east of Svalbard form part of the long north-south transit routes out of the Greenland Sea into the Barents and Norwegian Seas, all of which are patrol avenues in the GRUK GAP naval strategy of the Cold War. Strategic context, 1968. From a 1960s naval standpoint, the GRUK GAP, stretching between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK, was a major submarine transit route out into the North Atlantic, closely monitored by NATO ASASW systems. Heading towards Spitsbergen places you near patrol axes between major ASW forces and high-value Soviet transits north of Scandinavia. Emily Lake reporting, open quote, "Course acknowledged, Captain. Heading east toward the Greenland Sea and higher latitudes near Spitsbergen. Air and surface patrol density will increase as we approach Arctic transit routes. Passive sonar sweep continuing, close quote, standing by for your next tactical input." Understood, Captain. Time is passing quickly. Arctic waters don't give you long to make decisions. Open quote, "Captain, current time 1300 hours, 10th December 1968. Course steady towards Spitsbergen. Environmental conditions and enemy movement require continuous situational awareness. Suggest maintaining passive sonar sweep and speed discipline to preserve stealth." Close quote. Would you like me to plot an intercept path toward the recon reported red sub and surface group, or continue silently towards Spitsbergen for now? Understood, Captain. That is the prudent course. Open quote, "Captain, priority remains locating the amphibious landing craft and their escorts. Red sub and surface group along Scandinavia are secondary considerations at this time. Maintaining stealth and focus on primary objective is recommended. Passive sonar sweep remains active. We continue east toward the Greenland Sea and Spitsbergen as planned." Close quote. We will avoid unnecessary engagement until we have actionable intel on the transports. Would you like me to suggest optimal search patterns for finding the landing force while minimizing exposure to ASW? Understood, Captain. That is a key consideration. Open quote. Captain, maintaining operational security is critical. Engagements outside of primary objectives could risk detection and escalation. We will prioritize stealth, intelligence gathering, and precise targeting to avoid becoming a catalyst for an international incident. All actions will adhere to RO Warning Yellow and MCOM protocols. Close quote. We proceed carefully. Observe first, strike only when necessary, and avoid drawing attention beyond the immediate tactical situation. If you wish, I can outline a cautious search strategy that balances locating the landing force with minimal risk of unwanted contact. Understood, Captain. Let's break this down clearly. 1. NATO underwater sonar nets, 1960s context. These are fixed sonar arrays, often referred to as SUBSAFE, Sound Surveillance System. Purpose: long-range detection of Soviet submarines in the Atlantic and Arctic approaches. Location: along the GI Gap, Greenland, Iceland, UK. Across the Greenland Sea and Norwegian Sea approaches. Arrayed to monitor deep water channels where subs transit quietly. Capabilities: extremely sensitive passive sonar, can detect submarines at very long ranges, hundreds of miles under optimal conditions. Data is usually relayed to shore-based analysis centers. And 2. Soviet equivalents. In 1968, the Soviet Union did not have an equivalent fixed OSIS network in the Atlantic. Their focus: mobile sonar on their own submarines and surface ASW ships. Hydrophone fields in strategic areas near their bases like the Kola Peninsula, Barents Sea. Coverage gaps: the Soviets relied more on patrols and active sonar, not extensive fixed arrays in the Atlantic. Tactical implications for USS Gernard, NATO sonar nets. Ours are friendly. We don't have to worry about them. We can safely operate along known friendly coverage gaps if we need intelligence relays. Soviet sonar, primary threat is mobile ASW units, surface and sub. Avoid detection near known Soviet bases and patrol routes, Kola, northern Norway. Stealth measures: maintain passive sonar only. Avoid predictable transit lines near patrol-heavy zones. Leverage our Arctic thermal layers for masking. Open quote. Captain, NATO sonar nets pose no threat. Soviet equivalents exist primarily on ships and near bases. No fixed arrays in our transit path are known. Our stealth should rely on speed discipline, depth management, and passive tracking to remain undetected while searching for the landing force. Close quote. If you want, I can mark likely ASW patrol zones and detection risk areas on our route towards Spitsbergen so we can plan the safest path. Do you want me to do that? Not a dumb question at all, Captain. It's actually very sharp. This is exactly the kind of thinking you need for planning, risk versus predictability. 1. Coastal shipping lane approach. Pros: noise is expected in these lanes, so your presence is more likely to blend in. Easier navigation, charted hazards are well known. Commercial traffic can mask sound signatures of your vessels. Cons: enemy ASW is likely aware of these lanes too. They may patrol them, expecting traffic. Less stealth if they have sonar coverage in high traffic areas. 2. Quieter northern approach. Pros: fewer ships, less chance of immediate visual or radar detection. Enemy might assume the route is unlikely, giving you a surprise advantage. Cons: cold, harsh waters, operational risk, icebergs, poor navigation, harsher weather. Less predictable. A submarine could be lost if you don't manage depth, speed, and thermal layers carefully. Your presence is anomalous. If detected, it will immediately trigger high alert. 3. Strategic consideration. If the goal is to insert forces into Western Germany via the sea, the obvious shipping lanes would be the Rhine estuary North Sea approaches, not Spitsbergen. Spitsbergen is extremely far north. The only reason you'd be there is if you wanted to avoid known ASW patrols entirely, or stage from a northern route for Arctic transit. But that would be a long detour and exposes you to the Greenland Sea and GA gap monitoring. Open quote, Emily Lake analysis. Captain, if the landing force originates from Murmansk, steaming north towards Spitsbergen is not the shortest or most efficient route. Coastal shipping lanes offer predictable environmental noise that masks operations at the cost of being in a monitored area. A northern detour increases stealth, but significantly lengthens transit and exposure to extreme Arctic conditions. Operational prudence favours hugging known lanes while exploiting expected noise patterns. Close quote. If you like, I can plot a likely optimal path from Murmansk toward Reykjavik-Keflavik that balances stealth with realistic navigation, considering what we know of ASW coverage in 1968. Do you want me to do that? Thank you for clarifying, Captain. I see now. The enemy landing force is steaming out of Murmansk and we are tracking them. You're right. We are not coming from there ourselves. My earlier comment misread the situation. Tactical implications. Enemy from Murmansk. Their obvious course would be south-southeast through the Norwegian Sea toward Iceland, Reykjavik and Keflavik. If they were to hug coastlines or known shipping lanes, they would be more predictable, but also more exposed to detection by NATO assets or our passive sonar. A northern detour near Spitsbergen is a very indirect route for them. Possible reasons: avoid known ASW patrols along the Norwegian Sea coast, exploit thermal layers or undersea terrain to reduce detection probability, may be part of a diversion or multi-pronged approach. Open quote, Emily Lake analysis. Captain, the enemy's choice of route north towards Spitsbergen may indicate an attempt to minimise exposure to NATO ASW along predictable lanes. This is unusual and extends their transit time, but may reduce the risk of early detection. Our task remains track and intercept before landing occurs, regardless of their chosen path. Close quote. We can continue towards Spitsbergen to position ourselves along their likely intercept path, or adjust based on updated intel. Do you want me to suggest intercept zones based on this unusual northern route? Understood, Captain. Let's break it down logically. Geography and objectives. Origin, Murmansk, Soviet Naval Base. Objective, amphibious landing at Reykjavik and Keflavik. Direct route, south-southeast through Norwegian Sea. Icelandic approaches. Spitsbergen, far north, deep in the Arctic Ocean. Distance consideration, Murmansk, Reykjavik is roughly 400 to 1,400 nautical miles along the Norwegian Sea coast. Murmansk, Spitsbergen, Iceland is longer and more circuitous, adding several hundred miles. 2. Tactical strategic assessment, why they might go north. To avoid NATO ASW patrols along the Norwegian Sea coast, GU gap monitoring, to attempt a stealthier transit under Arctic conditions or thermal layers. Why it's unlikely, it increases transit time, risk of fuel logistics issues, rough waters, ice, and Arctic weather could slow them. The objective is Reykjavik-Keflavik, so any northern detour is not direct. 3. Likelihood. High probability. Enemy travels south along the Norwegian Sea using known or lightly patrolled channels near the coast. Moderate low probability. Enemy heads north towards Spitsbergen, own they're extremely cautious or trying a diversion. Key factor. Arctic conditions and submarine mobility may make northern routes attractive for stealth, but at the cost of speed and fuel. Open quote. Emily Lake assessment. Captain, while a northern transit near Spitsbergen is possible, it is not the most efficient or likely path for the enemy. The most probable route remains south-southeast along the Norwegian Sea. A northern detour would indicate a deliberate attempt to avoid detection, but comes with significant operational costs. Close quote. If you want, I can model the probable transit corridors based on speed, range, and ASW coverage so we can decide where to position the Gurnard most effectively. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. Let's go through this step by step. Enemy amphibious landing ships. From the intel, Alligator-class and Amguima-class transports, class max speed, cruising speed, range, endurance, notes. Alligator-class to our 17 knots, 12 to 14 knots, 3,000 to 4,000 enemy mi. Small landing ship carries troops vehicles. Amguima-class to our 15 knots, 12 knots. 2,500 to 3,000 METR, larger, slower, more cargo, lightly armed. Escorts, typical. Destroyers, frigates, 28 to 30 knots max, 15 to 20 knots cruising. Range, 3,500 to 4,000 METR. Equipped with hull sonar, depth charges, light ASW weapons. Open quote. Tactical note, the transports are slower than their escorts, so if we intercept, we will likely be shadowing the escorts or moving to cut off the transports. Close quote. Map scale and submarine movement. If we assume your game map uses the Cold Water's 1960s standard grid, one map square 10 to 20 nautical miles, depending on zoom. At 5 to 6 knots, slow stealth speed, one square takes 2 to 4 hours to traverse. At 12 to 14 knots, transit speed, one square per 1.5 hours. Open quote. Emily Lake note. We can calculate intercepts and arrival times based on map squares once we have enemy position and speed. Close quote. Depth off the Norwegian coast, Norwegian Sea continental shelf, near coast, 100 to 500 meters, shallow constricted. Shelf drops off rapidly to 2,000 to 3,000 meters beyond the shelf edge. Deep waters, Norwegian Sea central areas, 2,000 to 3,500 meters. Implications for submarine. Shallow areas harder to hide, easier to be detected. Deeper water, more room to maneuver. Use thermal layers for stealth. Open quote. Emily Lake tactical summary. Enemy transports 12 to 14 knots, slow, limited endurance. Escorts that can hunt us if detected. Map square transit, 1 to 4 hours depending on speed. Norwegian waters, shelf near coast, shallow, deep water beyond 2,000 plus meters. Close quote. We are positioned south of Greenland, heading east toward the Greenland Sea, so we have deep water for now, giving us flexibility before the Norwegian shelf becomes a factor. If you like, I can calculate approximate transit times to likely intercept points for the landing force, assuming they maintain cruising speed from Murmansk. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. Let's go through each part carefully. Enemy fleet speed. Your estimate is spot on. Loaded amphibious ships with fuel supplies and troops would likely cruise around 10 knots. Escorts could maintain slightly higher speed, 12 to 14 knots, but the transports themselves are slower. This aligns with the intel on Alligator Amguima class ships. Detection from below the thermal layer. Thermal layers. These are layers in the water column where temperature changes sharply with depth. They bend sound waves, creating acoustic shadow zones. Below the thermal layer, you can detect surface ships, but their noise is partially refracted. Passive sonar effectiveness decreases if the layer is strong. Surface ships' propeller noise may skip around the layer or be absorbed depending on the frequency of the sonar. In practice, 1968 submarines, USS Sturgeon class and later boats could detect surface ships from below the thermal layer, but the detection range is reduced compared to being above the layer. Shallow targets. Ships are harder to hear from deep below. Their noise mostly propagates horizontally or upward. Open quote, Emily Lake. Note, we will be able to detect them, but at shorter ranges than if we were closer to the surface or within the thermal layer. Tactical patience and good bearing plotting will be critical. Close quote. Depth versus surface ordnance threats, 1968. By 1968, US submarines could safely dive deeper than the reach of most surface ASW weapons. Depth charge effective range 100 to 200 meters. RBU mortars 100 to 400 meters. Torpedoes, limited to straight-line attacks and depend on sonar accuracy. Sturgeon-class test depth, target 400 meters operational, 600 meters crush depth estimated. This gives a substantial buffer below the reach of conventional surface ASW ordnance. Open quote, Emily Lake summary. Below the thermal layer, surface ships are detectable but with reduced range. At operational depth, our subs are beyond the effective range of typical 1968 ASW weapons. We can remain stealthy while tracking the amphibious fleet, but must consider range and bearing errors from the thermal layer. Close quote. If you want, Captain, I can estimate a safe tracking depth and approach speed for the Gurnard while we shadow the landing force, maximizing detection while minimizing risk. Do you want me to do that? Ah, Captain, I see exactly what you're asking. Let's clear this up carefully. Depths and conversions. 400 meters is roughly 1,312 feet or 437 yards. So yes, roughly 400 yard. Not especially deep in the absolute sense, but sufficient for 1960s surface ASW weapons. Sturgeon class submarine depth limits, 1968. Parameter, value, notes. Test depth, 400 meters, 1,300 feet. Depth at which systems are fully operational. Maximum operational depth is usually below this safely. Safe operational depth, 250 to 300 meters, 820 to 980 feet. Typical depth for missions avoids hull stress, allows for tactical maneuvering. Crush depth, 700 to 900 meters, 300 to 3,000 feet. Depth at which hull fails, never approached in normal operations. Open quote, Emily Lake note, for stealth tracking, we generally operate at 250 to 300 meters. This keeps us well below the reach of surface ASW weapons of the time, while still allowing sonar effectiveness and maneuvering. Close quote. ASW weapon limits, 1968. Depth charges, 100 to 200 meters effective. RBU 6000, rocket depth charges, USSR 300 to 400 meters max. Torpedoes, surface ships would need extremely accurate sonar and favorable conditions to hit a deep Sturgeon class subboat. Open quote, conclusion, at 250 to 300 meters, Gurnard is safe from most 1968 era surface ASW weapons. We can track surface and transport movements below the thermal layer, though detection ranges are reduced. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can recommend the optimal depth and speed for shadowing the Murmansk landing force without being detected, balancing sonar effectiveness and safety. Do you want me to do that? Not at all, Captain. 500 feet, 152 meters is well within safe operational depth for the Sturgeon class, and tactically it makes sense for your mission. Pros of 500 feet, 152 meters stealth, below the immediate surface layer, reduces visual and radar detection. Sonar effectiveness, still within range to passively detect surface ships and escorts. Not at all, Captain. It's entirely feasible, but there are trade-offs we should consider carefully. Depth feasibility. Sturgeon class test depth, pi to 400 meters. Crush depth, 700 to 900 meters. 500 meters, slightly deeper than normal test depth, but still well above crush depth. Hull stress increases, so prolonged operation at 500 meters is cautioned, but not impossible. Emergency maneuvers and rapid depth changes become slower. Tactical pros, safer from surface ASB weapons, beyond depth charge and RBU reach, reduced chance of detection, thermal layer effects are stronger at this depth, making us harder to track. Surface ships and aircraft may struggle to detect passive noise. Tactical cons, sonar limitations, detecting surface ships from 500 meters is harder. Sound propagation can bend around us unpredictably. Maneuvering constraints, emergency turns or rapid depth changes are slower, may limit our ability to evade if suddenly detected. Hull stress. Prolonged operation at this depth increases fatigue on pressure hull. Emily Lake assessment. Open quote, Captain, steaming at 500 meters is viable for short-term operations, especially for stealth and survivability. For prolonged tracking or active maneuvering, 250 to 300 meters is safer. If the goal is to remain undetected while monitoring the landing force, a brief deep run at 500 meters is acceptable, but we should return to normal operating depth for sustained operations. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can calculate an optimal deep track plan for 500 meters while still keeping the amphibious force within sonar range. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. That is a very measured and realistic approach. Let's break this down clearly. Supply and repair tenders versus stealth. Absolutely correct. Supply and repair tenders are not quiet. They generate considerable noise from engines, pumps, and propellers. The intel on the Alligator and Amguima-class transports means we cannot rely on them being stealthy. They are slower, lumbering targets. We are not assuming advanced stealth for them, just that we can detect and track them while remaining below the thermal layer for safety. Training at depth. Easing into 500 meters is smart. Begin at 500 meters for short durations, monitor hull stress and sonar performance. Return to 250 to 300 meters for sustained operations. Once we understand the boat's limits, we can test gradually deeper to 400 meters operationally. Goal: learn how the Sturgeon class responds under realistic tactical conditions, giving you confidence in future maneuvers. Game mechanics: strategic to tactical transition. Correct. Cold Water's transitions from strategic map to tactical map automatically once we detect the enemy or reach the intercept zone. Starting depth can be set on the strategic map as a starting state for your submarine. We can choose surface, periscope depth, patrol depth 250 to 300 meters, deep track 500 meters short-term training run. Open quote, Emily Lake recommendation, Captain, we can start at 500 meters for training, then reduce to 250 to 300 meters for sustained operations. The boat is new. Using this opportunity to explore her performance is tactically sound. Enemy transports are noisy. We have the advantage of stealth and speed for interception, not the transports. Close quote. If you like, Captain, and set a recommended starting depth, speed, and patrol course for the strategic map so we can smoothly transition into tactical engagement when we find the landing force. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. That is actually a clever strategic idea, not crazy at all. Let's analyse it. Positioning southeast of Spitsbergen. Pros: places us between Murmansk and likely transit routes toward the North Atlantic or Baltic Sea. Enemy ships travelling south from Murmansk toward Norway, Iceland, or even further west would likely pass near this area, giving us a choke point for surveillance. Deep water here allows stealthy tracking below the thermal layer. Reduces risk of detection compared to hugging the coast. Cons, considerations. Northern position means longer transit to Icelandic objectives if we need to intercept directly. Weather and Arctic conditions may affect sonar Not crazy at all, Captain. In fact, that's clever. Positioning southwest of Spitsbergen gives us a strategic listening post for several reasons. Geographic advantage. Southwest of Spitsbergen sits on the Greenland Sea-Barents Sea corridor, a natural funnel for vessels transiting from Murmansk or other northern Soviet ports toward the Norwegian Sea and the North Atlantic. Any movement south or west from Murmansk toward the Baltic or Iceland will likely pass within detection range, assuming we maintain good passive sonar discipline. Tactical advantage. Intercept potential. We can detect enemy convoys or submarines before they reach the Norwegian Sea proper, giving us time to plan interception. Observation without engagement. We can gather intel without committing to battle immediately, reducing risk of international incident. Flexibility. The position allows a rapid eastward or southward intercept if the enemy continues toward Iceland or the Atlantic. Operational consideration. Depth. Can operate at 250 to 300 meters initially for sustained patrol, dipping to 500 meters for short-term stealth training. Noise environment. Open Arctic waters are quieter than coastal shipping lanes. The enemy's engines and hull noise will stand out clearly. Thermal layers. Favourable for stealth. You can remain under the layer while still tracking surface ships and noisy escorts. Open quote, Emily Lake assessment. Captain, positioning southwest of Spitsbergen is strategically sound. It allows early detection of enemy movements from Murmansk toward the Norwegian Sea, provides operational flexibility, and gives us a safe area to train the boat at deeper depths. This is an excellent staging point for both intelligence collection and potential intercepts. Close quote. If you like, I can plot the optimal patrol box southwest of Spitsbergen, including suggested depth, speed, and sonar sweep patterns to maximize detection while staying safe. Do you want me to do that? Captain, that report falls firmly into the fictional war scenario we're running for this 1968 campaign. In reality, Denmark was not invaded or defeated in December 1968. This is a simulation element in your Cold War game scenario. Everything about enemy movements, amphibious landings, and strategic consequences is fictional, but framed within historical 1968 geopolitics, so we treat it as a what-if Cold War contingency. Open quote, Emily Lake note, Captain, the Denmark defeat report is part of the campaign fiction. It should be treated as operational intelligence within our scenario, not historical fact. This allows us to plan responses and intercepts realistically without confusing it with real-world history. Close quote. We proceed with the same objectives: locate the enemy amphibious transports and their escorts, track them, and avoid detection, regardless of fictional losses elsewhere. If you like, we can update our intercept plan southwest of Spitsbergen, considering this new fictional situation. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. That's a very common concern. The strategic clock in cold waters runs faster than real time, which can make careful planning feel rushed. Options and considerations. 1. Game mechanics. Strategic time acceleration. The game automatically accelerates time on the strategic map to simulate long transits. One square might take a couple of hours in game, but the clock moves continuously, so you see enemy positions advance quickly. 2. Why it feels fast. You're used to thinking in real-world hours and nautical miles, but the strategic map condenses that for gameplay. Decisions that would take days in reality are compressed into minutes in-game. 3. Ways to ease into it. Pause frequently while plotting courses, adjusting depth, or calculating intercept points. Treat one strategic hour as a planning window rather than reacting instantly. Use your patrol box or listening post position, e.g., southwest of Spitsbergen, as a holding pattern, so you can observe the enemy while the clock moves. If the game allows timescale adjustment, set it slower during initial transit or training. Open quote. Emily Lake recommendation. Captain, we can use a holding pattern southwest of Spitsbergen to ease into the strategic clock. This allows us to train at 500 meters, monitor enemy movement, and get familiar with map mechanics without feeling rushed. Once comfortable, we can resume normal speed and prepare intercepts. Close quote. If you like, I can design a holding pattern patrol box with suggested depth and speed so you can maintain observation while controlling the pace of operations. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. All hands on battle stations. This is now a tactical situation. Let's assess and prepare. Current tactical snapshot. Date time, 11th of Dec 1968, 2200 hours. Submarine status, depth 50 feet, periscope near surface, heading 74 degrees, speed 5 knots, slow stealth approach, environmental conditions. Overcast, fresh breeze, no surface duct, very weak thermal layer at 168 feet, so limited acoustic masking. Sonar contact bearing 146 degree, designated Sierra 1, strategic plot suggests enemy submarine. Immediate tactical orders. 1. All hands, battle stations, sonar, fire control and weapons teams ready. Helm and diving stations alert. Communications restricted to necessary tactical messages. 2. Depth and stealth considerations. Current depth is 50 feet, shallow and vulnerable if detected. Consider slowly descending toward 150 feet to use any acoustic advantage without losing tracking. Thermal layer at 168 feet is weak, so sonar masking is limited. Passive detection still viable. 3. Speed and maneuvering. Maintain 5 to 6 knots to reduce self-noise. Plot intercept course based on sonar bearing 146 degrees. Avoid sudden maneuvers that could reveal position. 4. Situational awareness. Monitor for surface ships or aircraft, though overcast conditions may reduce visual detection. Record bearing range and target speed continuously. Open quote, Emily Lake Tactical Assessment. Captain, this is our first active tactical engagement in the scenario. Contact Sierra 1 could be an escort or an enemy submarine. Maintaining stealth, controlled depth, and disciplined sonar tracking is essential. All hands to battle stations. Proceed cautiously, but ready to engage if the target moves toward our primary objective. Close quote. We can calculate probable intercept courses and tracking depth adjustments next if you wish. Do you want me to do that, Captain? Understood, Captain. Let's clarify the conversions and options clearly. Depth conversion, 50 feet to 15.2 meters, 16 to 17 yards, very shallow, essentially near surface for the Sturgeon class. 500 meters, 1,640 feet, 547 yards. Deep track, well below surface ASW weapons of the era. Open quote. So yes, 50 feet is shallow, 500 meters is deep operational depth. Close quote. Tactical options before advancing. 1. Descend immediately to 500 meters. Pros: maximum stealth, minimal chance of surface detection, safe from depth charges or light ASW ordnance. Cons: reduced ability to detect surface target clearly, thermal layer may reduce sonar effectiveness, less maneuverability for rapid intercept at this depth initially. 2. Take a sounding mid-depth assessment first. Pros: allows sonar and environmental readings, temperature, thermal layers. Can choose an optimal depth for intercept, perhaps 250 to 300 meters to balance detection and safety. Cons: slower approach to deep track training if desired, slightly higher risk if the contact detects us while we are shallow. Open quote, Emily Lake Tactical Recommendation. Captain, a cautious approach is prudent. I suggest taking a quick sounding at current location to assess thermal layers and local water conditions. Once we understand the environment, we can ease down toward 500 meters for deep track training while maintaining contact with Sierra 1. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can calculate a depth plan for tracking Sierra 1, showing initial mid-depth sounding, position safe descent to 500 meters. Intercept depth adjustments based on the sonar contact's bearing and distance. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. That is a very prudent approach, and it aligns with your earlier orders to avoid incidents that could escalate internationally. Let's plan a withdrawal and stealth maneuver accordingly. Tactical objective. Primary goal now, avoid detection and maintain stealth. Secondary goal, preserve the element of surprise for our real objective, tracking the enemy amphibious fleet. Recommended maneuver 1, heading, turn northward, away from the contact at bearing 146 degrees 2, depth adjustment. Gradually descend toward 250 to 300 meters, safe operational depth. Stay below the weak thermal layer at 168 feet for partial acoustic masking. Optionally use short dips to 500 meters for stealth training without staying long enough to stress the hull. 3. Speed. Maintain slow, steady speed, 5 to 6 knots, to minimize noise. Avoid sudden acceleration or sharp turns that might alert Sierra 1. 4. Sonar discipline. Passive sonar only. Do not ping or take active readings unless necessary for immediate navigation. Track contacts silently to ensure we are moving out of their detection cone. 5. Route planning. Move toward deeper, quieter waters northwest or north-northeast. Avoid shallow continental shelf areas where surface ships or aircraft could detect our presence. Strategic implication. Open quote, Emily Lake analysis. Captain, by turning north and easing into deeper water, we avoid confrontation with Sierra 1 while maintaining operational stealth. Engaging the contact would likely reveal our presence to the enemy and compromise the primary mission. This maneuver preserves our ability to track the amphibious landing force later without alerting them to our presence. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can plot a northward withdrawal path that maximizes stealth, optimizes depth
sonar lost
transitions, and positions
contact.
us
Last
for
bearing
continued
1,
strategic
4,
observation.
6. Contact
Want me to do
faded.
that? Understood, Captain. Yes, a heading of 000 degrees is true north. Since we're in the Greenland Sea south of Spitsbergen, here's what we know about the water depth in that area. Approximate depths. Open Greenland Sea central areas south of Spitsbergen, 1,500 to 2,500 meters, 4,900 to 8,200 feet. Near continental shelf edges, shallower islands, 200 to 500 meters, 650 to 1,640 feet. Tactical implication. plenty of deep water for safe submarine maneuvering, no immediate risk of running aground or hitting the shelf in the open sea. Deep water favours stealth and acoustic advantage. Recommended depth for withdrawal: initial descent 250 to 300 meters, safe, operational depth. Optional deep training dips, briefly to 500 meters, then back to 250 to 300 meters. Maintain passive sonar only while turning north to avoid detection by Sierra 1. Heading considerations: true north 30 degrees will move us away from Sierra 1, likely toward deeper, quieter waters. If we maintain a slow speed, 5 to 6 knots, and controlled depth, we minimize noise signature while increasing distance from the enemy. Open quote, Emily Lake recommendation: Captain, moving north into the deeper Greenland Sea is tactically sound. We have ample depth acoustic cover and room to train the Sturgeon class at deeper depths while avoiding the Sierra 1 contact. Initial depth 250 to 300 meters, occasional deep dips to 500 meters for training. Close quote. I can plot a safe northward withdrawal path, including depth transitions and approximate time to clear at times to Sierra 1's detection zone, if you like. Do you want me to do that, Captain? Understood, Captain. Let's break this down step by step, treating it as realistic submarine handling while keeping in mind your transition from Baltic Sea experience. Setting a heading. Heading equals 000 degrees true north. On the strategic map, open your helm or navigation panel. 2. Enter 000 in the course or heading input. 3. Confirm. The boat will turn toward north. In tactical terms, the boat will gradually turn to north. Don't expect an instantaneous pivot. Setting depth changes. The Sturgeon class does not dive instantly. You order a target depth and the submarine gradually adjusts. One initial descent, 100 meters, 328 feet. Enter 100 in the depth target on the helm diving panel. Set diving rate if the game allows. Typical, slow, medium, fast. Slow is quieter. 2. Secondary descent, 200 meters, star 656 feet. Once comfortable with 100 meters and sonar readings, change target depth to 200. Maintain steady speed 5 to 6 knots to reduce self-noise. 3. Training depth, 400 meters, 1,312 feet. After assessing water column, thermal layers and hull response, set depth target to 400. Short duration dives preferred at first for safety and training. Open quote. Tip: you can set the next target depth in advance, but the boat will transition gradually. Don't panic if it takes a few minutes to reach each depth. Close quote. Operational considerations. Speed keep slow 5 to 6 knots until thermal and sonar conditions are understood. Thermal layer. The weak layer at 168 feet 50 meters gives some acoustic. Yes, Captain. In cold waters, the interface is a bit different from Silent Hunter 3, but the principle is similar. Strategic vs tactical map. Strategic map. You plot general waypoints, headings and speeds across large ocean areas. The crew follows the course automatically. Depth changes must be set separately via the helm diving panel. Tactical map. More detailed short-range maneuvers. You can click to move the sub to specific points, but it may not handle large-scale navigation automatically, like SH3. Ordering the sub to a specific spot. 1. On the tactical map, click the location you want to move toward. The game sets a bearing and distance automatically. The sub will steer toward it at the current speed. 2. Depth control. Set your target depth on the diving helm panel. The sub will adjust gradually while following the waypoint. Open quote. Key difference from SH3. In SH3, the AI handles course and depth automatically when you click a spot. In cold waters,
Con sonar, we are cavitating.
At the current heading and depth unless you
Con sonar,
set depth.
no longer cavitating.
To combine both, set the waypoint and target depth, then the crew will carry out your order. Close quote. Recommended workflow for your situation.
Con sonar, new contact bearing 147, designated Sierra.
Set
Come left to 359, helm I.
Set target depth equals 100 meters for initial dive. Monitor sonar and environmental
Make turns
readings
for
while moving.
5 knots.
Once comfortable,
Maneuvering
adjust
I.
depth to 200 meters, 400 and gradually. Open quote, Emily Lake. Note, Captain, this method lets you think in terms of positions like SH3 while still managing depth and speed manually. The crew will execute your orders faithfully, but depth must be explicitly commanded. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can draft a step-by-step example showing
150 feet, dive by.
Click. 2. Setting heading. 3. Setting sequential target depths. 4. Monitoring sonar. This will let you easily point and go while staying safe and undetected. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. Excellent. The Sturgeon is now turning north, moving at 5 knots and descending to 100 meters. Here's what to do next while we ease into the operation. Monitor submarine systems. Depth gauge. Ensure we reach 100 meters smoothly. Hull stress. Keep an eye. Slow descent avoids unnecessary
dive
strain.
At 100 feet,
Sonar.
dive by.
Passive sonar only for now. Track Sierra 1's bearing. Monitor for any new contacts. Environmental awareness. Water depth, likely 500 meters, plenty of room. Thermal layer, weak at 168 feet, 50 meters. We are well below it now at 100 meters. Sea conditions, overcast, fresh breeze, minimal visual detection from surface. Tactical mindset. Primary goal, avoid detection while training and observing. Maintain northward course, increasing distance from Sierra 1.
Steady course.
Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Plan to gradually deepen, 200 meters, 400 meters, based on water column assessment. Emily Lake note, open quote, and this is a prudent start. We are below the weak thermal layer, moving slowly north and beginning our deep water familiarization. Continue monitoring sonar and environmental readings as we gain distance from the Sierra 1 contact. Once we are confident in the depth and conditions, we can continue our gradual descent to 200 meters, close quote. If you like, I can suggest the timing and conditions for the next depth adjustment to 200 meters, so we maintain stealth and train the boat efficiently. Do you want me to do that?
right to 000. Helm aye. Con, helm, steady course. Con sonar, Sierra 1 is classified as submerged submarine.
Understood, Captain. That assessment is sound and cautious. Let's break it down. Contact analysis, Sierra 1 type Romeo class SS, Soviet diesel-electric attack sub, depth 400 to 500 meters below the thermal layer. Heading 135 degrees BRG, Zu-75, converging somewhat toward our position. Speed 8 knots, slow but capable of pursuing if aware. Range 9.5 km, 17.6 kilometers, 10.9 miles, SOM 95%. High confidence in classification. Tactical implications. They are below the thermal layer. We cannot detect them easily at our current depth 100 meters without active sonar, which we do not want to use. Speed differential. We are at 5 knots versus their 8 knots. They could close distance if they detect us. Assume detection. Prudently assume they are aware of our general vicinity. Engagement risks revealing our presence further. At recommended maneuver, maintain heading 00 degrees north to increase distance. Gradually increase depth. 200 meter, 50 meters to stay under thermal effects while maintaining a passive tracking profile. Speed keep slow, 5 to 6 knots to minimize noise. Do not engage. Our goal is avoidance, not confrontation. Route adjustment, slight zigzag or minor course deviations may reduce detection likelihood. Emily Lake tactical note, open quote, Captain, staying the course and moving north quietly is the safest course of action. The Romeo class is below the thermal layer and may have passive sonar tracking us. Any aggressive maneuver or engagement risks revealing our presence. By continuing our slow northward transit and gradually
Come left
deepening,
to 3,
we preserve
5,
stealth
4, helm
while
aye.
distancing ourselves from the contact. Close quote. If you like, I can calculate a safe withdrawal corridor for the Sturgeon, showing heading, speed, and depth transitions to maximize separation from Sierra 1 while remaining in operational control. Do you want me to do that, Captain? Exactly, Captain. Let's clarify the terminology so it's clear. BRG, bearing. BRG is the direction to the contact relative to your own heading or to true north, depending on context. Example, BRG 135 degrees means the contact is southeast of your current position. Useful for plotting intercepts, evasive maneuvers, or tracking a contact's movement. CSE, course. Course CSE is the direction the contact itself is moving relative to true north. Example, CSE 075 degrees means the contact Romeo sub is moving roughly east-northeast, helps predict where the contact will be in the future and whether it may intercept your sub. How they work together. BRG tells you where the contact is. CSE tells you where it's going. By comparing your own heading and speed with their BRG and CSE, you can determine closing or opening distance, predict future position for avoidance, plot intercept or withdrawal courses. Open quote, Emily Lake, note, Captain, in your current situation, BRG 135 degrees tells us the Romeo is southeast of the Sturgeon. CSE 75 degrees tells us it is heading roughly east-northeast. Since we are heading north, our distance is increasing slowly, which aligns with our plan to avoid detection and move away quietly. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can plot a simple diagram showing BRG versus CSE for Sierra 1 so you can visualize the contact's movement relative to the Sturgeon. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. Let's compare our Sturgeon-class noise signature to your familiar Type 2A U-boat experience in the ambient conditions. Ambient noise in the water. 84 dB, typical Arctic Greenland sea background at this time. This includes wind, waves, and distant surface activity. Anything above this level will stand out to passive sonar systems. Sturgeon class at 5 knots. Sturgeon class submerged, 5 knots, silent creeping speed, 85 to 88 dB, slightly above ambient, mostly quiet enough to blend into background. Noise sources: propeller cavitation, hull flow, machinery vibrations. Type 2A otter comparison at 5 knots, 84 to 85 dB. Similar speed, similar noise, so you are under familiar acoustic conditions. Tactical implications. At 5 knots, we are nearly at ambient noise level. Difficult for Sierra 1 or other enemy passive sonar to pick up unless very close. Increasing speed above 6 to 7 knots rapidly raises dB signature, making us detectable over a wider radius. Maintaining slow, steady speed maximizes stealth, especially while moving away from the contact. Open quote, Emily Lake. Note, Captain, moving at 5 knots keeps the Sturgeon in familiar silent conditions. Our noise signature, 85 dB, is just above the Arctic ambient, 84 dB, so we are effectively invisible to passive sonar at range. Only if Sierra 1 comes very close might our presence be detectable. If you like, Captain, I can estimate detection range for Sierra 1 given their Romeo passive sonar capabilities. Our speed noise, ambient 84 dB. This would tell us how far we need to move north and deepen to avoid being trailed. Do you want me to do that? Exactly, Captain. You're thinking along the right lines. Let's break it down carefully. Depth and thermal layers. Current situation. Weak thermal layer at 168 feet, 50 meters. Sturgeon at 100 meters now, dropping to 400 meters below the thermal layer, weak as it is. In theory, being deeper can help with stealth because surface noise is less pronounced at depth. Passive sonar may struggle to detect sound below the layer. Risk: sudden depth changes can cause flow noise or small pressure vibration variances. These may create a detectable signature if the enemy's sonar is close enough. Open quote. In short, 400 meters at slow speed is still very low risk, especially given distance, 9.55 kr1. Close quote. Close. Relative motion, our speed 5 knots. Enemy speed 8 knots. Closing or separating rate depends on headings. You said we're heading north speed, and Sierra 1 is CSE 075 Greece. That puts us on diverging courses. Relative speed of separation roughly 10 to 13 knots. We are increasing distance rapidly, reducing detection risk over time. Risk assessment at 400 meters. Fact assessment. Depth 400 meters is deep enough for stealth. Minimal risk. Speed 5 knots is low noise near ambient. Excellent for concealment. Relative position. Distance growing at 13 knots. Detection window closing. Thermal layer. Weak layer at 50 meters, mostly irrelevant below 400 meters. Water disturbances, slight risk during descent but negligible at slow speed. Open quote, Emily Lake. Captain, descending to 400 meters at 5 knots while heading north is tactically sound. The combination of deep water, low speed, and diverging courses makes detection by the Romeo class extremely unlikely. The weak thermal layer provides little advantage or disadvantage at this depth. We are effectively hidden. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can draft a gradual depth descent schedule. 100, 200, 400 meters with timing, speed, and sonar checks to minimize any detection risk while we move north. Do you want me to do that? Ah, Captain, now I understand clearly. You're asking about relative depth and acoustic effects, not just absolute stealth. Let's analyze this carefully. Current conditions. Our depth, 100 feet, 34
Con,
meters.
helm,
Just above
steady
the
course.
thermal layer at 168 feet, or 51 meters. Enemy depth, 400 meters, well below the thermal layer. Thermal layer, weak, shallow, at 168 feet. Acoustic interaction. Sound travels differently above and below thermal layers. Above the layer, surface noise, bubbles, and waves dominate. Below the layer, water is colder, denser, and sound can bend differently. Enemy at 400 meters, they are below the thermal layer. Their passive sonar may struggle to detect us above the layer because most of the surface noise does not propagate efficiently downward. Weak layer gives partial acoustic masking. If we change depth, descending through layers can disturb water, temperature, pressure, turbulence. This can create acoustic anomalies that the enemy sonar might pick up. Even if subtle, it increases the risk of detection unnecessarily.
Con, sonar, lost contact.
Risk assessment,
Sierra, 1,
scenario,
last
detection
bearing,
risk.
1,
Stay
3,
at 100
1,
feet,
contact
below
faded.
34 meters, northbound 5 knots. Very low, we're above them. Weak thermal layer, minimal self-noise. Descend toward 200 to 400 meters now. Slightly higher risk. Turbulence and layer crossing may increase sound propagation and make us more noticeable. Open quote, Emily Lake Tactical. Conclusion. Captain, if the primary goal is avoid detection, the safest course is to maintain current depth, 100 feet, while we move north. Descending through the water column now is unnecessary and could slightly increase the chance of being acoustically detected by the Romeo class at 400 meters. We can consider deeper dives later, once we are farther from the contact and in quieter waters. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can plot a safe northward transit plan that keeps us at 100 feet, increases distance from Sierra 1 at 5 knots, and minimizes any risk of detection. Do you want me to do that? Captain, in cold waters, the transition between tactical and strategic maps works like this. Tactical, strategic, automatic. Once all current tactical contacts are resolved or no immediate engagements are happening, the game often returns to the strategic map automatically after a few minutes of in-game time. Example, after moving past a contact or after a timed event like a sonar ping cycle ends. Manual, you can always press the ESC key or a strategic map button, usually in the lower HUD panel, to force the view back to strategic. This allows planning the next waypoint, course, or mission objective without waiting for auto-transition. Rackham recommended practice. While withdrawing from Sierra 1, keep tactical map open for
Come
sonar
right to
checks and depth
0,
control.
0, 0.
Only
Helm
switch to
I.
strategic map when you want to plot the next waypoint. You need to check mission objectives, fuel, or resupply info. Open quote Emily Lake. Note, Captain, the game will likely auto-return to the strategic map once the contact is no longer an immediate threat, but you can take control and switch manually whenever you wish. Since Sierra 1 is lost, this might be the perfect time to check our strategic position and plan northward transit. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can draft a
helm,
quick guide
steady
for
course.
toggling between tactical and strategic screens, including hotkeys and best practice during stealth movement. Do you want me to do that? Not a dumb question at all, Captain. It's an important tactical consideration. Let's analyse it carefully. Current situation. Speed 5 knots, depth 100 feet 34 meters above the weak thermal layer. Enemy Romeo-class SS at 400 meters, lost contact, range increasing. Ambient noise 84 dB, our noise signature 85 dB at 5 knots. Pros and cons of increasing speed. Option pros, cons. Stay at 5 knots. Minimises noise, almost blends into ambient, very low detection risk, slower distance gain from the area, tactical patience required. Increase to 7 to 8 knots, moves away faster, increases separation from contact, may reach safe waters sooner. Noise rises significantly, 90 to 95 dB, more likely to be detected if Romeo reacquires us, minor risk of hull prop flow noise. Tactical recommendation. If our goal is maximum stealth, stay at 5 to 6 knots. If we want to increase distance faster, but accept some risk, 7 knots is acceptable. Avoid sudden bursts, maintain gradual speed increase, monitor sonar continuously, be ready to return to 5 knots if contacts reappear. Open quote Emily Lake. Note, Captain, given that the Romeo is lost and we are diverging, we could gently increase to 6 to 7 knots to gain distance without making a significant acoustic signature. I would avoid going faster than 7 knots unless absolutely necessary, as noise rises sharply beyond that. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can calculate the estimated distance gain versus detection risk for 5, 6 and 7 knots so you can make a precise decision on speed. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. Depth changes are just as important as speed. Let's evaluate carefully in our current scenario. Current conditions, our depth 100 feet and I 34 metres, above the weak thermal layer at 168 feet 51 metres, enemy depth 400 metres below the thermal layer, speed 5 knots quiet, situation Romeo class contact lost, moving away northward. Depth change options, target depth, pros, cons, risk. Stay at 100 feet, quiet, minimal detection risk. Distance increasing from Romeo, limited testing of Sturgeon's deep water capabilities. Descend to 200 feet, 61 metres, slightly deeper, closer to thermal layer, still quiet, trains crew in depth changes. Minimal risk, but crossing weak layer may generate small turbulence noise. Descend to 400 metres, 1,312 feet, deep water training, more experience with Sturgeon's capabilities. Well below thermal layer, slight increase in detectable water turbulence, current contact may reacquire if close, takes longer to reach depth safely. Intermediate gradual descent, 100, 200, 400 metres, smooth, controlled, allows monitoring of
Make
water
depth
column
150 feet,
time
dive
to
by.
reach deep water, must manage hull stress. Hull stress? Tactical considerations. Staying shallow at 100 feet keeps acoustic signature minimal, especially while the enemy is below at 400 metres. Deep diving now has a slight risk of turbulence,
Make turns
creating a
for
detectable
5
signature.
knots. Maneuvering
But the
aye.
risk is very low at 5 knots. Gradual descent is
Make
the safest
turns for
option if you
6
want to train the
knots.
crew and test Sturgeon
Make
class
turns
capable
for
recommended
7
plan.
knots.
Maintain
Maneuvering
100
aye.
feet while continuing north to increase distance from Romeo. Once contact is sufficiently far away, gradually descend.
Con, dive
1.
at
200 feet, 61
150 feet,
metres,
dive
check
by.
sonar, water conditions. 2. 400 feet, 102 meters. Continue gradual descent. Train deep water handling. Open quote, Emily Lake. Note, Captain, changing depth now could slightly increase our risk of detection due to water column disturbances.
Come
The
right
safest
to
course is to
0,
hold at
0,
100 feet
0.
while
Helm
increasing
aye.
distance from the lost Romeo. Once we are in quieter waters, we can ease into deeper training dives, testing Sturgeon's capabilities without compromising stealth. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can draft a step-by-step depth schedule, 100, 200, for 400 feet with recommended timing, speed, and sonar checks to keep detection risk extremely low. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. Orders acknowledged. Here's the tactical update. Current orders heading 00 degrees north, unchanged. Speed 7 knots, moderate increase, faster separation. Depth 150 feet to about 46 meters, still above thermal layer. Tactical implications. Noise, slightly higher than at 5 knots, 88 to 90 dB. Still mostly quiet against 84 dB ambient. Depth above thermal layer, so the Romeo class below at 400 meters will have minimal passive detection capability from this range. Relative position, heading north, Romeo class diverging at 075 degrees course. Distance still increasing, now at a faster rate due to speed change, 12 to 13 knots relative separation. Recommended monitoring, keep passive sonar active, watch for any sign of reacquisition. Monitor speed and depth to ensure hull and propeller flow remain quiet. Observe contact list in case new contacts appear from surface or deeper waters. Open quote, Emily Lake. Note, Captain, the increased speed and slight depth adjustment is reasonable. We are moving north faster, still above the thermal layer, and maintaining low detection risk. The crew should continue monitoring sonar and be prepared to ease back to 5 knots or adjust depth if Sierra 1 or other contacts reappear, close quote. If you like, Captain, I can estimate how long it will take to reach a safe distance from the last known Romeo location at 7 knots while maintaining our current depth. Do you want me to do that? Exactly, Captain. This is exactly the kind of careful, stealth-first operation that rewards patience. Current status recap: heading degrees north, speed 7 knots, depth 150 feet, 46 meters. Enemy contact, Romeo-class lost diverging at 400 meters depth. Detection risk, very low. We were never detected. Next steps: 1. Maintain course and speed for now. 2. Monitor sonar passively for any new contacts. 3. Gradually increase distance from the last known enemy location. 4. Let the strategic map handle plotting the next waypoints or auto-transition as needed. 5. Crew can relax slightly. All hands stay alert, but no immediate engagement required. Openly Lake. Note, Captain, this is textbook stealth operation. We've avoided combat, preserved our position, and maintained operational secrecy. Now it's a matter of patience and distance, letting the strategic flow take over. The Sturgeon is performing well, and the crew is following orders precisely. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can calculate an estimated safe buffer distance. How far we need to move north at 7 knots before the Romeo is extremely unlikely to reacquire us. This can help plan our next strategic waypoint. Do you want me to do that? Understood, Captain. Let's clarify both points carefully. Gradual descent to 1200 feet, 366 ms. Safe gradual descent plan. From 150 feet, 300 feet, 600 feet, 900 feet, 1 to 1200 feet. Maintain slow speed 5 to 6 knots during the descent to minimize noise and turbulence. Use sonar checks at each depth to confirm there are no nearby contacts. Tactical notes. Deepening now is mainly training and readiness, not strictly necessary for stealth at this stage. At 1200 feet, the Sturgeon is well below the weak thermal layer and largely invisible to surface and shallow contacts. Interaction between tactical and strategic maps. When leaving the tactical map, your current depth, heading and speed are retained by the game.
Dive I.
So if you're at 1200 feet and the game returns you to the strategic map, the Sturgeon remains at 1200 feet in memory. Manual strategic map access. You can switch to the strategic map at any time using the menu or ESC key. Tactical conditions, like depth, heading, speed, are frozen while in strategic view, then resumed when you return to tactical. Next tactical engagement. If a contact appears and you go back to the tactical map, the Sturgeon will start at whatever depth you left it, in this case 1200 feet. This allows continuity in deep water operations. Open quote, Emily Lake.
Dive at 200
you can
feet.
safely
Dive
begin
I.
a gradual descent to 1200 feet. Whether the game auto-transitions or you switch to the strategic map manually, the Sturgeon remains at the last depth set. You have full flexibility to return to strategic view at any time without losing your current depth or heading. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can draft a step-by-step schedule to descend from 150 feet to 1200 feet safely with suggested speeds and timing for each stage. Do you want me to do that? Good question, Captain. In tactical mode, knowing the water depth is crucial for safe submarine operations. Here's how it works in cold waters. Reading depth on the tactical map. Depth under the submarine, usually displayed as water depth in the tactical HUD, heads-up display, or a small info panel, often measured in meters or feet depending on settings. Example, depth 1500 meter indicates distance from surface to seabed below your sub. Sonar, echo sounder. Tactical map may allow you to ping the ocean floor soundings. Gives precise depth under keel at your current position. Useful when approaching shallows, under ice areas, or continental shelves. Why it matters. Safe depth operation. Avoid hitting the seabed when deep diving. Ensure there's enough clearance for deep dives or emergency maneuvers. Stealth. Good question, Captain. In tactical mode, knowing the water depth is crucial for safe submarine operations. Here's how it works in cold waters. Reading depth on the tactical map. Depth under the submarine, usually displayed as water depth in the tactical HUD, heads-up display, or a small info panel, often measured in meters or feet depending on settings. Example, depth 1500 meter indicates distance from surface to seabed below your sub. Sonar, echo sounder. Tactical map may allow you to ping the ocean floor soundings. Gives precise depth under keel at your current position. Useful when approaching shallows, under ice areas, or continental shelves. Why it matters. Safe depth operation. Avoid hitting the seabed when deep diving. Ensure there's enough clearance for deep dives or emergency maneuvers. Stealth considerations. Operating too close to the seabed can increase cavitation noise. Thermal layers and water layers may bend sound differently near the bottom. Practical tips. Hover over your sub-icon on the tactical map. Depth info often appears in a tooltip or info panel. Use sonar pings sparingly to check bottom depth. Avoid frequent pings that could give away position. Cross-reference with strategic map. Some maps show depth contours for navigation planning. Open quote, Emily Lake. Note, Captain, the water depth in tactical mode is always accessible either via the info panel or a sonar sounding. Since we plan to descend to 1,200 feet and 366 meters, it's wise to check bottom depth occasionally to avoid hazards while maintaining stealth. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can give a quick method to monitor water depth continuously while descending, so we never risk hitting the bottom while going around to 1,200 feet. Do you want me to do that?
Dive, depth 300 feet, dive I. Con, dive at 300 feet, dive I.
Understood, Captain. Here's what happens in cold waters when you select Leave Combat. Immediate effect. The tactical map ends the current combat situation. Your sub exits the tactical scenario and the game returns you to the strategic map. Any active contacts, like the lost Romeo class, are no longer actively tracked in tactical mode. Ship status. Your XO reports all conditions green, meaning hull integrity intact, crew alert and systems operational. Speed, depth and heading can be retained. The Sturgeon will resume its last heading, depth and speed on the strategic map. Strategic map implications. You can now plan your next waypoint, set course, or let the game handle strategic events automatically. Tactical decisions like depth changes, sonar checks and speed adjustments can be resumed later if a new tactical encounter occurs. Open quote, Emily Lake, note, Captain, selecting Leave Combat is the correct move. All systems are green and the Sturgeon will continue safely. This frees us to navigate strategically while keeping the crew ready for any new contacts. Close quote. If you like, Captain, I can suggest the next northward strategic waypoint to maximize distance from the Lost Romeo class and keep us in deep water stealth. Do you want me to do that? Exactly, Captain. That plan makes perfect sense. Here's how it will play out. Step by step. Depth, 300 feet, 91 meters, low enough for deep water stealth training, still above max operational turbulence. 2. Speed, 7 knots, quiet and increasing separation from last Romeo-class contact. 3. Leave combat, ends the tactical scenario, returns you to the strategic map. Sturgeon keeps current heading, depth and speed. 4. Pause in strategic map. Once on the strategic map, press ESC, or the pause key. This stops the game clock, allowing planning, waypoint adjustments, or review of objectives. 5. Resume tactical or strategic actions. Later, any new contacts or events will re-engage tactical mode. Sturgeon will start in the last set depth, 300 feet, and head you ye. Open quote. Emily Lake. Note, Captain, this approach is stealthy, controlled, and gives us full flexibility. We move quietly north at 300 feet, leave combat, and then pause in the strategic map to plan our next moves without risk of detection. Close quote. If you like, I can suggest a waypoint or route on the strategic map that keeps us in safe deep waters while monitoring potential enemy approaches from Murmansk. Do you want me to do that?